Very good afternoon, one and all. Thank you very kindly for your promptness. I know we're all keen to do our duty and continue with this important agenda that we have before us today. We are now at agenda item 8 on the pre-established and agreed agenda for our regular permanent council meeting. This is to the consideration of the draft resolution entitled Exceptional Authorization from the Indirect Cost Recovery Reserve Subfund for the Inter-American Defense Board's relocation and for approval of the guidelines and governance of the Capital Fund. This draft is contained in document CP/Doc 4146/25. I yield the floor now to Ambassador Solano, Permanent Representative of Costa Rica and Chair of the CAP. Madam Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon to all of you, and thank you very much for your promptness. We're here presenting this draft resolution, which, if I may, I'd like to introduce. It has two general aspects I'd like to share with you. First, the general aspect that we present for your consideration is to, as an exception, have up to $180,000 from the Reserve Subfund, the ICRRS, for the relocation of the IADB, which, as we all know, will now be on the third floor of the administrative building, which is located on F Street. And the second item is to establish the necessary guidelines and the governance committee for a new capital fund for the OAS. This governance committee is a key element because thanks to it, we'll implement a strategic and transparent management of all real estate belonging to the organization. The committee will include 5 representatives from the Permanent Council, together with the Executive Director, Dr. Bogacek, whom, as we know, joined us on September 15th, and we want to take advantage to congratulate him once more and welcome him. And we'll also include a delegate from the Executive Director's office, as well as supervision from CAP through the President and Vice Presidents as needed and based on their appointments. And aside from the supervision and direct support from the Permanent Council. This resolution just begins the process. So through it, what we are going to do is to ask the Secretariat to begin with the consolidation of the committee, helping us prepare the documents that will give us the legal support to the work of the team. So we'll ask the legal secretariat to prepare the bylaws and prepare monthly reports of how the different implementation stages proceed. And I want to take advantage of this opportunity to ask all the delegations for their participation and support in this negotiation process, thanks to which, and thanks to your collective commitment, we've managed to prepare a document which was worked by all of us collectively, jointly, at several different meetings that were held, which turned out to be very productive. I would particularly like to express my gratitude to Bolivia, Colombia, United States of America, Jamaica, and the Dominican Republic for enthusiastically accepting to be members of this committee, and my gratitude for your willingness to help us in this new activity. The President of CAP reiterates its commitment to support the process in the best possible way, always with transparency and willing to hear everything that the delegations want to recommend to improve processes. This resolution, therefore, was collectively done and supported by all the delegations, I think only need, if you all agree, that we adopt it by acclamation, if you all agree. Thank you very much.
The chair takes it then that the draft resolution entitled Exceptional Authorization from the Indirect Cost Recovery Reserve Subfund for the Inter-American Defense Board's relocation and for approval of the guidelines and governance of the Capital Fund is hereby approved. Our next item on the agenda, item number 9, concerns the consideration of the invitations to the 58th Special Session of the General Assembly. These invitations require the authorization of the Council in accordance with Articles 9C and D and 10 of the Rules of Procedures for the General Assembly. Based on the reports presented by the General Secretariat, I am hereby consulting whether we may proceed first with the approval of the draft resolution entitled Invitations to the 58th Special Session of the General Assembly requiring the authorization of the Permanent Council. This was circulated as document CP/Doc 6144/25. Seeing no comment or objection, approved. Now I consult you on whether we may proceed with the approval of the draft resolution entitled Invitations to Civil Society Organizations registered with the Organization of American States to the 58th Special Session of the General Assembly. The draft was circulated as document CP/Doc 6145/25. Seeing no objections, approved. Our next item is to consult the delegations on the approval of minutes of the following permanent council meetings. First, the special meeting of December 7th, 2022, Acta 2406. Next, the regular meeting of August 6th, 2025, Acta 2559. Followed by the special meeting of August 13th, 2025, Acta 2560. And finally, the regular meeting of August 20th, 2025, Acta 2561. There being no comment or objection, approved. Finally, we now proceed to our last item of other business. I will be offering the floor to delegations wishing to present any matters that are of purely informational in nature, pursuant to Article 45 of the Rules of Procedure. We had indicated earlier a number of countries with interest, and I see that now requests have been made, and we will proceed first with Argentina. Argentina, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. We were told through an official communique from the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights that in line with the recent decision of the Inter-American Human Rights Court in the case of Chirino, Salamanca on August 21st, 2025, the Inter-American Commission reaffirms its competency regarding the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. In that decision, the court determined that the complaint presented by the State of Venezuela in the American Convention on Human Rights in 2012 lacks validity, and the decision is based, amongst other reasons, on the fact that this was not adopted within a democratic context. Hence, the Inter-American Commission considered essential to give priority of sending this to the court to consider the legitimate demands of the victims and strengthen the legal safety or security of the Inter-American system. And with that, the Commission reaffirms its competency to monitor the human rights situation in the country, receive and process requests, and offer precautionary measures and reports to the International Committee. And this is the message I wanted to share with you, that it was asked to have an in-situ visit for the last quarter of 2025 to Venezuela to observe firsthand the human rights situation in the country, as well as the conditions of the persons who are deprived of their freedom in the metropolitan center called Helicoide. Argentina will formally ask the council at the next meeting to allow the IACHR to go to that meeting to carry out the necessary process required and analyze the situation so that they can concretely have that visit, which they have presented in a communique. But we'd like to ask all the members to be informed as to the processes and the results. Thank you very much, sir.
The floor.
Mr. Chairman, my delegation would like to inform on a matter that is very serious. We have been told that we have Resolution 125 of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, IACHR, approved on July 15th and published in its web page on September 12th, almost 2 months later, whereby 4 members of the IACHR have decided that Commissioner Carlos Bernal Pulido abstain from following matters related to Peru until the end of his mandate, in other words, until the 31st of December. Bernal Pulido asked for this abstention for the period during which Peru presented the postulation of his reelection, and it concluded on July 27th of this year. 4 members of the IACH asked for his abstention until the end of his mandate, flagrantly violates the principle of legality. Item 2 of Article 17 of the Rules of Procedure of the ICHR established as an impediment to participate in the discussions, investigation, deliberation, or decision of a matter 2 specific situations. First, that they have the nationality of the state in question, or second, that they participated previously in any decisions regarding the same matters, or having acted as an advisor for one of the parties involved. Bernal Pulido is not Peruvian, nor has he ever acted as an advisor or representative of Peru. In fact, from reading the resolution, it's clear that the decision of extending Bernal Pulido's abstention is not based on any specific impediment. In fact, it's just that 4 commissioners believe that there is incompatibility of some type. These commissioners have a right to think that, but cannot forget that the incompatibility is a figure different from and more subjective than the actual impediment. The incompatibility is regulated by Article 4 of the Rules of Procedure, and Item 2, Article 2, says that it must be determined by a qualified majority of at least 5 commissioners. The decisions of the majority of the IACHR are established in the regulation. The rules respond to a logic of if there's a rule or regulation approved by the ICHR, we cannot accept that just some commissioners may decide to ignore it, forgetting the requirements established by it and reach different agreements. This behavior attempts against the credibility of the Commission and generates damage to its reputation, undermining the trust of the member states. The Peruvian state expresses its rejection and deep concern for this. This representation believes that this resolution is a reprisal against Commissioner Bernal Pulido's candidacy by Peru. In his presentation at this Permanent Council on May of this year, Bernal Pulido respectfully and clearly gave critical opinions as to the performance of the ICHR on different matters. We should not allow or validate practices in the inter-American human rights systems to silence a voice violating the rules and the rights. Peru will continue to supervise this matter. Thank you very much.
Guyana, you have the floor.
Chair, I would like to report that the general and regional elections were successfully held in Guyana on September 1st. The campaign period leading up to Elections Day itself, and the weeks since then have all been peaceful. The party in office was returned with a small increase in support. The returning president was sworn in on September 8th, and he swore in his cabinet on last Saturday, September 13th. Guyana would like to express its appreciation and thanks for a number of electoral observer missions, amongst which was the EOM from the Organization of American States. A number of observations were made by the various EOMs at their press conferences. We look forward to receiving the formal reports in time. Our thanks again to the OAS for the OAS Electoral Observer Mission. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Guyana. Canada, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Since 2021, every September the 30th, the Canadians throughout the world celebrate the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, recognizing the profound consequences and painful consequences of the pensioners' systems and their attack or mistreatment of the First Nations, where for over 150 years the children of the First Nations and these people were removed from their families and their communities and forced to go to schools which were often far away from their homes, and many of them never returned alive. We still find in old pensioner sites tombs that speak of the essential work that still must be done to obtain a true reconciliation with the First Nations. In Canada, this is a day where we honor all the survivors and recall the lives of all these children who suffered this.
Commemorative initiative led by Indigenous communities and inspired by residential school survivor Phyllis Webstad, whose orange shirt was first taken from her on her first day at residential school. It became a powerful symbol to reflect on and raise awareness about the intergenerational impacts of the residential school system on First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children, families, and communities. On this day, Canadians around the world wear orange shirts to symbolize the loss of freedom, culture, and self-esteem experienced by many Indigenous peoples' children. It is a collective reminder that every child matters. To this end, Canada wishes to inform member states that, in observation of the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, the Permanent Mission of Canada will be displaying the survivors' flag at the OAS main building. Conceived by the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation at the University of Manitoba and created in consultation with survivors from Indigenous communities across Canada, the flag is a powerful expression of remembrance for those that have been and continue to be impacted by the residential school system. Reconciliation is an ongoing process that requires humility, listening, respect, and meaningful action. On this National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, we reaffirm our commitment to truth and healing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Canada. St. Kitts and Nevis.
Thank you very much, Chair. St. Kitts and Nevis wishes to advise of the passing of former Governor General of St. Kitts and Nevis, Sir Edmund Wickham Lawrence, GCMG, OBE, CSM, JP. The government and people of St. Kitts and Nevis are united in profound sorrow at the passing on September 7th of former Governor General, His Excellency, Sir Edmund Wickham Lawrence. Sir Edmund's life was one marked by distinguished service to our nation. From his notable contributions to the field of economics and business, to his dedicated stewardship as the Federation's third Governor General, he embodied integrity, wisdom, and a fervent commitment to the advancement of our country. His leadership, clear vision, humility, and profound sense of duty inspired generations of citizens and have left an indelible mark on the fabric of our nation. In honor of his immense contributions and in accordance with official government protocols over the course of the last week, the national flag of St. Kitts and Nevis was flown at half-mast on all government buildings, on official residences, and beyond the Federation at our missions, and will again be flown half-staff on the day of his funeral on a date yet to be announced. St. Kitts and Nevis extends deepest and most heartfelt condolences to Lady Lawrence, the entire Lawrence family, and all who loved and admired this exceptional man. As a nation, we pause to reflect on the immeasurable legacy of a beloved son of the soil who served with distinction and grace, leaving behind a timeless record of excellence and patriotism. A book of condolence has been opened today at the Embassy and the Permanent Mission of St. Kitts and Nevis and will remain open until 4 p.m. tomorrow, Thursday, and an invitation is extended to all who may wish to share expressions of sympathy. May his soul rest in eternal peace, and may his family find solace in the immense outpouring of love and respect from a grateful nation. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, St. Kitts and Nevis. Uruguay, you have.
Thank you, Chair. To inform that during the month of September in Uruguay, we are celebrating a new edition of the Diversity Month. This year it has the slogan of diverse communities against all types of violence, a topic which should concern all of us, and that the Inter-American Human Rights System, through the report of the Inter-American Commission on Violence Against LGBTQ plus persons, has been working with in an exemplary manner. And in Montevideo this month, we received two important events from the LGBTQ plus community. The LGBTQ plus Summit Pride Connection, which centers on economic inclusion, offering conferences, workshops, and fairs for employment on topics like inclusive enterprise and diversity in the work sites, organized by the Cámara de Comercio y Negocios in Uruguay. And the march, the Diversity March in our country, which will take place in different capitals or of the departments, but on September 26th, it will be in Montevideo and will be one of the most important events of the year in our capital, grouping more than 30,000 people a year. The gender identity, sexual orientation of people cannot be a reason for discrimination. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights sets that all people are the same under law and have the same right of protection for any type of discrimination. Likewise, the American Convention on Human Rights includes amongst its delimiting elements for the states the non-discrimination against any person for any reason. And for this reason, we'd like to invite the states and the Inter-American system to continue allowing for spaces and reflection to strengthen the diversity agenda with an intersectional approach and cross-cutting approach on human rights matters with the participation of all interested parties, stakeholders, academia, and so forth, who are involved in the defense of human dignity. Thank you very much.
Chile, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. And we'd like to inform that on September 8 and 9, this month, at the 100th anniversary of the Electoral Service of Chile, our country held the 18th Inter-American meeting of electoral authorities that grouped high representatives of the electoral bodies of different countries of the region. At the meeting, which was organized with the Canadian government, had the participation of the Foreign Affairs Minister of Chile, Mr. Alberto Franclaveren, the Secretary General of this organization, Mr. Alberto Randin, the Ambassador of Canada and Chile, Mr. Karen Weil, and the Secretary for the Strengthening of Democracy, Mr. Sebastian Kalkich. The team of the Cooperation and Electoral Observation Department and the Special Rapporteur for the Freedom of Expression of the Inter-American Convention, Mr. Pedro Vaca, included many of the panelists who participated in this event. Thank you very much, sir.
You have the floor.
Thank you, sir. And actually, it's more of a question, a point of order than an intervention on other matters. And to remind that we had a pretty long discussion during Brazil's presidency in the negotiation of a new regulation or rules of procedure for the Permanent Council, and that led to the adoption of Article 45C, with the obligation that all states must use this space for interventions of a merely informative nature. It was just a recommendation, and now it is a rule. Though some colleagues and delegations, with all due respect, in the opinion of Brazil, have used this space to present substantive speeches regarding the position of their countries on the foreign policy of their countries and topics and matters that are within the OAS as well as outside. And if that's the case, there could be the possibility of maybe asking for an item to be included in the agenda. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for the rule which was discussed at length in our debates, and that is to avoid other delegations to be surprised, and so that we can be transparent, so that we can all prepare for the debates. I think it's important for the topics to be clearly and explicitly mentioned so that all the delegations can ask instructions and ask for the necessary consultations and react to topics that many are not only of the interest of the country that's asking for the floor during this time reserved for other matters. So it was just an appeal to you, Mr. Chairman. I know it's difficult. People sometimes lose for this because it's a pretty long regulation and there were many changes, but I did want to bring this up and remind all of you that Article 46C is in force. Thank you.
I see that there are no further requests from the floor. And as this is my last regular meeting of the Permanent Council as chair, I would like to just take a moment to reflect on the past few months, if you will indulge so kindly. First of all, I want to thank the Permanent Council's office for their incredible support throughout my chairmanship, as well as, of course, my noble and very able vice chair, who has served well and helped inspire me to be better. I'd further like to express my appreciation to my own delegation, and in particular my able assistant on these matters and coordinator for the Permanent Council for Canada, Marie-Lou Moisson-Dome, without whom these meetings would not have run as smoothly. So thank you very much, Marie-Lou, and of course all others who have helped. In including those who baked the little sweets we had out there this morning, which were called sucre à la crème, which are very traditional, usually eaten around Christmas time in Canada. Also, I'd like to extend my thanks to all member states as you've worked with us to help ensure that it has been, I think, a fairly constructive and productive semester together, where we've avoided unnecessary friction and found ways forward in relatively peace and at the level, I think, of dignity that this council so deserves. We have sought to foster constructive engagement, collaboration, and pragmatic decision-making, and we are grateful for the help in doing so from the whole period of my chairmanship. Since July 1st, we have advanced priorities building on previous mandates from the General Assembly and the work undertaken in various committees of the OAS and the Permanent Council. Canada's chairship came at a dynamic and forward-looking moment for the organization, with conversations on important issues such as institutional modernization of the General Secretariat and preparations to deal with the financial pressures we are dealing with and the upcoming Special General Assembly on the budget. We prepared the ground for that Special General Assembly, and we want to thank the collaboration of the CAP chair, in particular, Ambassador Solano, and all members of the CAP in your work there. Particularly special for me has been the symbolism of being the first chair to work with a historic new figure in the leadership of the OAS, that is the Assistant Secretary General, who is breaking barriers and opening new ground and giving example to many young women in the diplomatic and professional world. And I have been honored to serve with you as chair in your first experience dealing with a chair. I hope it hasn't been too painful. And her arrival, of course, complemented the arrival of our Secretary General, Albert Ramdin, who was also breaking barriers for this organization. So I will extend this claim by saying symbolically that I was the first chair to work under both the new historic SG and ASG of the Permanent Council, of the Organization of American States. And in particular, it's been a delight working with the ASG and your team on such important issues such as the International Day of the World's Indigenous Peoples and the 8th Inter-American Week for Indigenous Peoples, which of course resonates particularly with Canada. We place democracy and human rights at the heart of our agenda, reinforcing our long-standing commitment to the rule of law, institutional accountability, and the protection of populations living in situations of vulnerability. This included topics such as the update on the situation in Venezuela, the rule of law and governance in the Americas, arbitrary detention and state-to-state relations, and of course, the special meeting on the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which will be held immediately following this meeting. We aimed to uphold full respect for the rules of procedures of the Permanent Council and take due note of Brazil's intervention under other business, including the recent provisions adopted by consensus by member states, and to implement them in good faith and in a manner that strengthens the Council's role and legitimacy. We aimed to promote inclusive participation, maximize the efficient use of available resources, and maintain the momentum on issues of shared interest. We hope that we were successful, at least in some ways, in these efforts, and that the next chairs will be able to continue and build on whatever humble progress this chair has been able to contribute to. It was an honor chairing the Permanent Council of the OAS, and now I look forward to continuing my work from my usual seat in my usual capacity representing Canada here at the OAS. Thank you kindly for being gentle with me. There being no further business, I consider this meeting adjourned. We will give the Secretariat until perhaps quarter after to rearrange things so that we can have our special session of the General Assembly, or I'm sorry, Permanent Council on the Inter-American Charter in an orderly fashion. So we'll see you again in 11 minutes. Thank you. Bon après-midi, chers collègues. Le secrétariat, après avoir vérifié que le quorum est présent, alors j'ai l'honneur de déclarer ouverte cette séance extraordinaire du Conseil permanent. Nous sommes réunis aujourd'hui pour commémorer le 24e anniversaire de la Charte démocratique interaméricaine.
We will now be celebrating the 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. So, this meeting has been convened at the request of the Permanent Mission of Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, the Bahamas, Bolivia, Canada, Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Grenada, Guatemala, Mexico, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, the Dominican Republic, Suriname, and Uruguay to celebrate this 24th anniversary. The chair recognizes that there have been certain challenges for the delegations to express their interests in this resolution, this item, in other words. So we're open, the chair is open to any other delegation that might want to co-sponsor this request for this meeting. So according to Article 43, I would like to put before you the draft agenda that we have in document CP/OD 2563/25. If there are no objections or any other comments, we will consider the draft agenda adopted. And so it is. On behalf of the Permanent Council, I would like to welcome our distinguished panelists to share valuable insights into the state of democracy in our region and the opportunities before us. Your contributions are essential to enriching today's discussions as we work together to strengthen democratic institutions and seize the opportunities for progress and consolidation of democratic governance across the region. As we continue this special meeting, let us do so in a spirit of cooperation, shared responsibility, and a firm commitment to the democratic ideals that unite us. Today, we reaffirm our collective duty to protect and strengthen democracy for the benefit of all peoples in the region. Thank you very much for your presence and your participation in this very important meeting. In English.
4th anniversary of the Inter-American Charter. We extend a warm welcome to our distinguished panelists who are joining us for this special meeting. To begin, and in accordance with the order of business, I am pleased to invite Mr. Hugo de Sala, former Chief of Staff to the OAS General Secretary General, to take the floor. Mr. de Sala, it is a pleasure to welcome you back to the Permanent Council again. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Warm greeting to you and to the permanent representatives, to the Assistant Secretary General, and our panelists, and of course, my dear colleagues at the OAS. I have been asked to make some remarks on the origins of the Democratic Charter, and I would like to remind you of the process that led to the approval of the democratic charter. It was a long process, as we had it in 48 with the OAS charter, Article 3, that mentioned the political organization of member countries and democracy. And there are important parts of history that led us to the charter, such as what happened in Santiago in 59, where agreements were established for representative democracy. In 85, there was another very important reform in the charter of the organization, where as a main purpose of the OAS, we spoke about representative democracy and crystallized that. In 90, in the Secretariat, we put together the unit for the promotion of democracy that undergirds what it article reflects. This had to do with the promotion of democracy. And in 91, the resolution 1080, which was crucial for the very first time, the possibility was established of sanctioning or having sanctions for if there was a breach or any interruption in the democratic process. This was applied various times, and in the course of its application, some gaps were discovered, which led to 1,800 and the decisions that were taken by member states, especially over several times the break of democracy, which paradoxically could come from governments that were democratically elected. And this is a historical fact where during those years we had Canada that became a member, and this membership was very important because it was a great impetus to promote and defend democracy henceforth. Later on in the history, a very difficult situation cropped up. At the end of the 89s and 90s, Central America had armed clashes, which were substantial. During that time, the organization participated and had the common approach of the need to go back to or strengthen, in other cases, democracy. And then finally, to simplify the process, I'm trying to sum this up as quickly as possible, but on the 11th of September 2001, there was the Inter-American Democratic Charter that was established. There were decisive actions at that time. The importance of the approval of the Inter-American Democratic Charter is that it was one of the moments in the history of the organization in which the concept of democracy, through its definition and its attributes, were unanimously embraced by member states. And I think it's worthwhile to underscore this important fact. The Democratic Charter reflects the bedrock, and that democracy is a common good, no shadow of a doubt about that. And we have to defend it collectively, and the responsibility of upholding democracy, not only of every country, but also it is the responsibility of all, a collective responsibility, a responsibility in the lap of all member states. And that was the consensus in 2001. Now, what has happened since then? I would say, Mr. Chairman, that we have to be frank and open and recognize that there have been some phenomena that has eroded the trust in democracy. in that it is the best system of government as taken by the inhabitants of many countries in the region, and the conviction that existed in 2001 does not have the same force today. On the other hand, it's quite clear, this is what we see, that there is a process of using ideology in political decisions and in foreign policy in certain countries, and this is a phenomenon that's affecting daily living together of member countries, because dialogue, of course, has become difficult. And as a result of that, Mr. Chairman, I think it's quite right that we reaffirm that the consensus that we had when the charter was established seems to be broken today, and I think it's important to recognize that so that we can work to rebuild this. This is important for our organization. And I would also like to say that it would be very interesting here, the members of the panel, and hear some ideas in what we can do henceforth to go back to the consensus of 2001 and to move ahead, to double up our areas to promote and defend democratic values as enshrined in the Inter-American Democratic Charter. It is important to not forget the decisive clarion call to the young people of our countries in this process. If the youth does not participate in strengthening and defending democracy, future is going to be glum. It's going to be difficult. I'm about to wrap up, but I think that one of the keys in this work ahead of us is education for democracy. And education for democracy, there's still a lot of ground to cover in the organization. I think that it would be important to consider the possibility of having an education program for democracy with the participation of member countries and universities from the countries of the region, so that we can reach out to the young people and they can inform other inhabitants in the region as to the nature of democracy, and that it is the responsibility for each and every inhabitant of the region. So I conclude, Mr. Chairman, by recalling that an important fact took place outside of the region, but I think that it would be helpful for member countries, and that is the fact that European countries, through the European Council, have declared on the Day of Democracy that this is a strategic interest for the Union, and thus there is a convergence of opinions. There is a set of objectives that I think could be used and learned from. Time is of the essence, and I don't want to go on, so let me just round this off looking at the possibilities of offering my words to the Permanent Council and express my happiness to be once again in this hall in which I participated so many times for many years, and thus I think I would like to consider the OAS my home. Thank you very much.
Your intervention was very thoughtful and thought-provoking. Next, I am pleased to invite Dr. Julio Jose Rojas Beas, Vice President of the Inter-American Juridical Committee, to deliver his remarks. Dr. Rojas Beas, welcome back to the Permanent Council. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm grateful for this opportunity, as it is a unique privilege to address this distinguished Permanent Council on the occasion of the 24th anniversary of the adoption of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. My remarks will focus on the vision developed by the Inter-American Juridical Committee regarding democracy as a cardinal principle that has inspired both the charter of our organization as well as the fundamental democratic instrument adopted by acclamation in Lima, Peru on September the 11th, 2001. Allow me to begin by recalling that on September the 15th, we commemorate the International Day of Democracy, established by Resolution 62-7 of the United Nations General Assembly. This coincidence is timing, and timing is not fortuitous, but rather reflects the universality of the democratic imperative and the pioneering contribution of the Inter-American system to the development of democratic international law. It is also noteworthy that the General Assembly of our organization adopted Resolution AG Res 3004 on the creation of the voluntary group to follow up on the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which, with the support of the Secretariat for the Strengthening of Democracy, promotes dialogue and exchange of good practices in support of the consolidation of the principles of the Charter of the organization and the Inter-American Democratic Charter. It is important to continue this innovative mandate in order to keep alive the conversation about the relevance of the Inter-American Democratic Charter and its challenges in the current circumstances, such as polarization, the reduction of civil space, and the use of disruptive technologies by anti-democratic actors. The holding of this session is extremely timely, and for that reason I congratulate and thank the Permanent Mission of Guatemala and the other delegations that requested it. The Inter-American Juridical Committee, the OAS advisory body on legal matters since its inception in 1906 as the International Board of Jurisconsults, has played a decisive role in the conceptualization and progressive development of the democratic principle in our hemisphere. His doctrinal work has allowed for the crystallization of a distinctive legal concept that goes beyond the mere formalism to embrace a comprehensive understanding of democracy as a way of life based on the human dignity of the people subject to the jurisdictions of the member states of our organization. The vision developed by the committee unequivocally establishes that democracy is the cornerstone of the inter-American legal and institutional building. This conceptualization does not emerge from a theoretical abstraction, but a systematic analysis of hemispheric state practices and the normative evolution of the regional system. The committee has identified democracy not only as a form of government, but also as a structural principle of the American international law that generates concrete legal obligations for the state within the framework of their memberships in our organization. The charter of the organization, since its adoption in Bogota in 1948, enshrined an indissoluble link between the representative democracy and the fundamental purposes of the system. Article 2B establishes as an essential purpose to promote and consolidate representative democracy with respect for the principle of non-intervention. This formulation, as indicated by the Inter-American Juridical Committee, goes beyond the mere programmatic declaration and becomes a binding legal obligation. The 1985 Cartagena de Indias Protocol of Reforms strengthened this commitment by establishing in the amended preamble that representative democracy is an indispensable condition for the stability, peace, and development of the region. This normative evolution, which has been thoroughly analyzed by the Commission, reflects the consolidation of a principle that has gone from being a political aspiration to becoming a norm belonging to the regional corpus juris. The committee has developed an evolving interpretation that recognizes in these provisions not only state obligations, but also the corresponding rights of the American people. This construction has been fundamental to establish that the effective exercise of representative democracy is a principle on which the inter-American system is based. The adoption by acclamation of the Inter-American Democratic Charter represents the culmination of decades of doctrinal development led by the Legal Committee, an instrument which the committee has characterized as the authentic interpretation of the fundamental treaties of the system, codifies and systematizes the inter-American democratic law that has been progressively developed since the founding of the regional system. Article 1 of the Democratic Charter proclaims that The peoples of the Americas have a right to democracy, and their governments have an obligation to promote it and defend it. This formulation, which was the subject of the committee's conceptual work, establishes a fundamental collective right that generates correlated obligations both for individual states as well as for the hemispheric community as a whole. The Inter-American Juridical Committee has interpreted that this right is not limited to the electoral dimensions, but encompasses the right to live in a political system characterized by the separation and independence of public powers, unrestricted respect for human rights, access to justice, government transparency, and accountability. This multidimensional understanding constitutes a distinctive contribution of the inter-American system to contemporary international law. One of the committee's most significant contributions in this area has been the doctrinal reconciliation between the principle of non-intervention and the collective defense of democracy. The committee has established that the voluntary adoption of democratic commitments through international treaties creates obligations whose fulfillment may be subject to international scrutiny without it constituting intervention in internal affairs. This legal construct sets forth in chapters 4 and 5 of the Democratic Charter, allows for the articulation of mechanisms for collective action ranging from preventive diplomacy to the suspension of a member state in cases of a breakdown of the democratic order. The committee has clarified that these actions do not constitute intervention, but rather the legitimate exercise of the hemispheric democratic solidarity expressly consented by the states when ratifying the instruments established by the system. The Inter-American Juridical Committee has also studied emerging threats that require innovative legal responses, electoral authoritarianism that maintains democratic appearances while undermining institutions, the capture of the state by private interest, the erosion of the rule of law through illegitimate constitutional reforms, and the use of digital technologies to manipulate the democratic process. In the face of these challenges, the committee has developed the conceptual distinction between democracies of origin and democracies of exercise, establishing that the democratic legitimacy must be maintained throughout the entire period of government through effective respect for the essential elements set forth in Articles 3 and 4 of the Democratic Charter. Distinguished representatives, democracy is the cornerstone of our hemisphere, and it is a principle that must be permanently protected by law and by the concrete actions of states and institutions. This has been established by the charter of our organization, the Inter-American Democratic Charter, and the study of issues in this area conducted by the Inter-American Juridical Committee. The 24th anniversary of the Democratic Charter finds us facing challenges that require us to reaffirm our commitment to this legal vision. Democracy is not a definitive achievement, but a permanent construction that requires constant vigilance and decisive actions when threatened. This threat materializes precisely when the indivisible triad of democracy, human rights, and the rule of law is fractured. Elements that operate in a relationship of structural interdependence where the weakening of any one of them inexorably erodes the integrity of the democratic system as a whole. The doctrinal legacy of the work of the Inter-American Juridical Committee shows how the Inter-American Democratic Charter provides our organization with the conceptual and normative tools necessary to face these challenges. 24 years after its approval by acclamation in Lima, the Inter-American Democratic Charter remains fully in force, and its founding principles remain core and transcendental elements of the hemispheric legal order, forming a corpus juris whose effective compliance by member states is not merely a conventional obligation, but a categorical imperative for the preservation of the democratic institutional architecture that underpins peaceful coexistence and the comprehensive development of our people. Finally, the hemispheric democracy, as established by the Inter-American Juridical Committee, is not merely a form of government, but a legal expression of the human dignity and a necessary condition for peace, development, and the effective enforcement of human rights. On this 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, we remain committed to making the democratic principle not only the cornerstone of our legal system, but a living reality for all the peoples of the Americas. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you, Dr. Rojas Baez, for your presentation. Next, I am pleased to introduce Ms. Patricia Gomez, President of the Bar and Notaries Association of Guatemala. Ms. Gomez, welcome to the OAS Permanent Council. The floor is yours.
you very much. Señor Secretario,
Mr. Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Albert Ramdin, Ms. Assistant Secretary General Laura Hill, Mr. Chair of the Permanent Council, Stuart Savage, Mr. Secretary for the Strengthening of Democracy, Sebastian Kralhevich, panelists, ambassadors, representatives, delegates of the permanent missions, good afternoon. It is a great honor for me to address such a distinguished forum on behalf of the Bar Association of Guatemala, an institution that I have the privilege of presiding over and which brings together more than 50,000 professionals in the field of law and social sciences. It plays a fundamental role in the justice system in my country. Justice in Guatemala has played a decisive role over the last 25 years. We have experienced significant progress, but also significant setbacks. Along the way, the support of the international community and the inter-American and universal human rights system has been key to set precedents that now guide our path. The Inter-American Democratic Charter has become a fundamental pillar to promote democracy, strengthen institutions, and expand the protection of rights in our region. Unfortunately, after a decade of progress in strengthening the rule of law, Guatemala faced a serious setback that caused serious concern in 2023. The justice system attempted to undermine the results of the presidential elections in an unprecedented event for our country and for many others in the hemisphere. This attempt was contained thanks to the timely reaction of the citizenry and the support of the international community. The Democratic Charter allowed member states and the OAS General Secretariat to act with prudent firmness through diplomatic action and technical missions that guaranteed respect for the popular vote. In Guatemala, as rarely before in our history, many citizens closely followed the sessions broadcasted live by the OAS Permanent Council. We listened attentively to each intervention, every word of defense of representative democracy, which was very encouraging. Allow me to express on behalf of the Professional Association of the Bar Association and Notaries of Guatemala, and as a Guatemalan, my deepest gratitude to the member states and the Organization of American States for this gesture at such a decisive moment for our country, showing us that the Democratic Charter is not only valid, but can come to life and be effective in critical circumstances for the region. Certainly, the challenge continues. Guatemalans have the arduous task of strengthening democracy and working to respect and consolidate institutions so that the rule of law prevails. At the Bar Association, we are committed to promoting a true culture of legality. We are working to transform paradigms and build a professional association that defends democratic values and judicial independence. As we commemorate 24 years of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, it is appropriate to highlight its first article, which says, "The peoples of the Americas have a right to democracy, and their governments have an obligation to promote and defend it." Ladies and gentlemen, we have a difficult road ahead of us, but we are not alone. Citizen engagement, support of the international community, and the positive impact of the Inter-American Democratic Charter will allow us to move forward so that representative democracy becomes a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gomez. Your remarks were very meaningful given the reality and challenges your country is facing. To conclude this panel, I am pleased to welcome a recorded message from Senator Ivan Flores, President of Parlamericas. Could we please play the video?
Mr. Ambassador of Canada, Mr. Savage, President of the Permanent Council of the OAS, Mr. Albert Ramdin, Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Your Excellencies, ambassadors of the four Americas, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be able to share these minutes with you, personally or virtually through you. But because of the time elements, we were unable to coordinate agendas. But what is important is that we mention what concerns us here in Parlamericas, and that is that when the confluence of two anniversaries, one of the Inter-American Charter as well as the International Day of Democracy, invite us to stop and think in depth about the state of our democracies, our institutions, and in particular, in light of a global and hemispheric context, which is clearly showing serious democratic setbacks and growing geopolitical tensions, a worsening of the public security situation in our countries, and in particular, the persistence of profound social inequalities, which are the reason for social disturbances, as we've seen. And without this critical situation, Parlamericas would like to invite us to reaffirm the validity of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, not as a ceremonial or declaratory event, but more as an imperative, ethical and political imperative to safeguard the stability, the freedom, and the peace of the Americas. The Inter-American Democratic Charter must be the most important collective commitment of our hemisphere with democracy, which to date has been a milestone that is an outstanding and eloquent calling to action. So almost at 1/4 of a century of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, it is valid more than ever, and in times of uncertainty is the roadmap for us to defend democracy, the rule of law, the human rights, and the participation of the citizens within the structure of our states. And its effectiveness will depend on our political will to make it possible. Our political will to make it possible. The alternative is that each country will face the crisis on their own is an illusion, because the only possible road ahead has to be a collective and harmonized response. And in this critical crossroad, the situation is clear. Either we cede space for authoritarianism and isolation, or we all commit to a coordinated and collective response that will strengthen our institutions and democracies. This particular crossroad requires a more inclusive and plural multilateralism, truly reflecting the diversity of our societies and our parliaments, strengthening the shared democratic values, building consensus between diversities, capable of transforming the differences into bridges for integration. In Parlamericas, we are convinced that in this effort, parliaments are key actors to renew multilateralism so that hemispheric cooperation can keep its roots in the popular will, in the democratic expression, in the democratic deliberation and the pluralism of our societies. The Charter itself, expressly recognizing representative democracy as indispensable for stability, peace, and development in the region, confers the legislative power of our countries the responsibility of translating that democratic mandate into clear and firm responses to the citizens' demands and the risks, of course, that our citizens face. Ladies and gentlemen, Parlamericas, as an interparliamentary organization of the Inter-American system, which was created in response to a resolution of the General Assembly, agrees with the adoption of this charter and enshrines this commitment and is witness of this historical moment when the region bet for the cooperation as an instrument of integration and stability, which is once again fully enforced at this time. Parlamericas is fully aware and committed to this historical situation and recognizes that it must become a concrete responsibility. We must act as a bridge between the democratic obligations and their practical implementation through the legislative national work, ensuring that the Democratic Charter can strengthen with a clear voice the the democracy at this decisive moment for democracy, Part America reaffirms its role committed to the inter-American system to make the promises of peace, stability, and development a reality, as we know is stated by the Inter-American Charter. Let this be a time for us to renew our common will and work together. And this is my calling to each and every one of us. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank Senator Flores for providing us with that compelling video with those thoughtful remarks. Now, before opening to the floor to member states, I'm going to accede to a special request and invite our much appreciated Secretary for Strengthening Democracy, Ambassador Sebastian Krajalovic, to take the floor so that he can then undertake other important business after. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the panelists who spoke. And to you for giving us the floor at this time. We know that in a few minutes we have to go to the area between Belize and Guatemala, where OAS mission is helping care for the peace and dialogue there. Because this possibility of having institutional dialogues is key at these times when, after 24 years of the adoption of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, we still have challenges globally and regionally. It's not a coincidence for a system that's based on the legitimacy of dissent, which is the law of the majority, the weights and counterweights. It's not a coincidence that the growing polarization phenomena have become difficult to adopt. And the social fragmentation, the deterioration of trust in the institutions and the people, and the global phenomena like climate emergencies and the transnational organized crime have led to demands that democracies are unable to satisfy at times. So the question we ask is, what can we do today, 24 years after, in our organization to strengthen democracies? And here, Chair, for good or bad, there's no silver bullet. There's no key response to solve our problems. But there are a variety of tools that could reinforce what we do to care for the health of our democracies. If we look back, the normative framework, beginning with the OAS Charter, Article 2, that's mentioned by Dr. Rojas Baez, Resolution 1080 of the General Assembly of 1991, and the Inter-American Democratic Charter itself, give us key rules for this. First, I'd like to mention the importance that the behavior of the organization has to be strictly based on mandates. It is only in this way that member states and the societies and peoples can be sure that this forum is not serving one particular political position, but is neutral. And its work is to promote those principles that allow us to express ourselves, to compete, to reach agreements, that diversity of different points of views. The second key is the integrality, the comprehensiveness. And it's important to review the Inter-American Charter, and we find a diversity of lists showing that to defend democracy and to strengthen it is to advance in different directions. And that's why it's important to mention that the new organizational structure defined by this Council, expanding the Secretariat for strengthening of democracy, is a good step forward to work together with the member states and respond to the three legitimacy sources of democracy seen in the specialized literature. We think of the free, electoral, fair, and transparent and inclusive electoral processes. We think of the legitimacy of procedures of how the institutions work systemically, allowing the majorities and the minorities to express themselves, and we also the legitimacy of the results and how we increase the quality of the public management to allow the rights of the citizens to be a reality. And likewise, we have to mention the critical situation mentioned by Mr. Hugo de Sela and mentioned in our Chapter 6 of the Inter-American Charter, and before that, way before that, in Articles 46 and 95 of the OAS Charter. And that is how, with the education, can we promote, install, reinforce principles, democratic principles and values, an activity or job that the OAS can play a key role in. But we also agree with what Dr. De Sela said. Maybe we haven't given it we haven't dedicated enough to it. And to commemorate this 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, we prepared a program which, for last-minute problems, we were unable to have it on the 11th of September itself, which is the day of the anniversary of the Charter, as well as very deep wounds showing the value of democracy in the whole hemisphere, north-south. The event that we expected to begin this stage of reinforcing the educational values of the democratic will be on the 31st of October, and we'll have the Nobel Prize where he or one of the main theoreticians on democratic values and institutions will be present with outstanding speakers, where we'll begin the idea of reinforcing the educational dimensions. And Professor De Sela said that we have to work with the youth, which is key to promote and consolidate democracy throughout America. And in that line, follow what the Secretary General always says, is to turn this into a region of peace and prosperity for all. Thank you, Chair. And I apologize for not being present, but we'll follow it closely and hear all the presentations made by all the different delegations.
Strengthening democracy. Having heard presentations, the floor is now open to comments and observations from member states. I see a keen interest, and let us start with the Dean of our Permanent Representative Corps, Antigua and Barbuda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, may I say that I came to make this statement because I thought this special session was far too important for Antigua and Barbuda not to be represented at the highest level and to be present. But we have an urgent bilateral matter, so as soon as I finished making this statement, I apologize to everyone, but I will have to depart. But I thought I would explain why that will happen, Chair. Thank you very much. Now, colleagues, between 2010 and 2015, before I assumed my present duties, I had the honor of serving as a member of the Friends of the Inter-American Democratic Charter at the invitation of President Jimmy Carter. Our task as the Friends was clear: to help ensure that the Charter served as a practical guideline and a framework for safeguarding democracy in our hemisphere. The Charter affirms two linked propositions. The peoples of the Americas have a right to democracy, and governments have an obligation to promote and defend it, as we were reminded by one of our guest speakers just a few minutes ago. These are not aspirational words. They are fundamental principles by which our peoples should live in greater freedom. Today, as we mark the Charter's 24th anniversary, democracy and the rule of law in our hemisphere face grave challenges. We see growing disregard for the separation of powers, the troubling rise of political violence, and an erosion of free speech and of human rights. The Charter was never meant for ceremony. It is a living commitment, a pledge to be practiced, not just to be proclaimed. Our peoples expect us not only to reaffirm its principles in words, but to implement them in deeds, because it is their lives that we are considering. We must also acknowledge that in many of our societies, minorities still lag behind in equity and equality. Democracy cannot be said to flourish if whole segments of our populations are left behind. At the heart of the Charter is the guarantee of free and fair elections. This cornerstone of democracy must remain sacrosanct, ensuring that every citizen's voice is heard, respected, and counted. As the Charter enters its 25th year, the task before us is straightforward. Apply its provisions with consistency. Use its preventative mechanisms as intended, especially Articles 17 and 18. Protect civil space. Reinforce the integrity of elections beyond observation, and uphold the norms that sustain constitutional government. Mr. Chairman, Antigua and Barbuda strongly supports the Charter's continued role as a practical framework for democratic stability, relevant in periods of calm and indispensable in times of crisis. The peoples of the Americas have a right to democracy, and our governments have the duty to defend it. That is the promise of the Charter, yesterday, today, and in the years ahead. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Antigua and Barbuda, and we appreciate your effort in being here today despite very important bilateral matters. Before we proceed, just a gentle reminder to all that we have established a 5-minute speaking limit for each intervention. The clock, as we have on the screen, is there to help you. It includes a 30-minute sort of grace period, but feel free not to use that. And I wish you all the best in these excellent interventions. Colombia, you are next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the top table, and all our colleagues and the general public. It's an honor to step in and celebrate the 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. We supported this, and that's when we supported Guatemala's proposal. In the words of Gustavo Petro, real democracy is that in which the people have the power to transform their reality, to live with dignity, and to fully participate in the construction of their own future, their own fate, their destiny. Democracy over and above elections, as Sebastian said, means to empower people, facilitating their participation when it comes to taking decisions, to push in changes, transforming changes that allow them to live with dignity and justice. Today, our democracy is grappling with a lot of different challenges: persistent inequality, manipulations of electoral processes and the absence of transparency, digital disinformation, and the poor use of technologies, which ends up affecting the quality of the public discourse and affecting citizens' trust. These challenges require definitive actions, which a long-term view to deal with them and confront them. The Inter-American Democratic Charter is a live instrument. It's in force, and it's crucial for the essence of democracy, as those who spoke before me have said. Nonetheless, its efficiency and relevance depend on our ability to adopt it and to adapt it to the current challenges. And that is why it's imperative to move towards a more comprehensive understanding of democracy that includes, across the board, all of the principles of environmental sustainability, the full-fledged guarantee of human rights, and a focus on social and political inclusion. That's the only way that the Charter can continue to be a transforming cornerstone of our democracy. Democracy is not a final destination, but rather an ongoing construction in the inter-American system with the principles and instruments that characterize it. This has been key for Colombia along this path. In the past, this system was very important for recovering political rights of the Republic of Colombia, a history that reaffirms our conviction in the role that this organization can and should play. And also, I should like to underscore the advisory opinion 1232 that marks a milestone in the evolution of international law to establish the protection of the environment and action in the face of climate change. These are sine qua non conditions for the real vitality of human rights and for upholding solid democracy. This was also just said by Ambassador Kraklovich. This opinion directly links to the democratic legitimacy with the capacity of states to guarantee a life full of dignity, which is equitable and sustainable, especially for the most affected population given environmental degradation. This not only broadens the material scope of democracy as we have it enshrined in the Inter-American Charter, but also offers a blueprint so that as states, we can fairly correspond and step up to the challenges of climate change and thus boosting citizens' confidence with the inclusion and accountability in public decisions. As such, it is very important to underscore the value of the follow-up mechanism on the implementation of the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption, MESATIC, which in promoting cooperation among states to improve transparency and fight against corruption, it becomes a key instrument in the OAS to strengthen our democracies. And then lastly, the impact of disinformation in our democratic processes is necessary to look to strengthen our democracy so that we can continue to share good practices and effective tools that allow us to grapple with this disinformation in electoral processes and public life. We have to take on joint initiatives of education and critical digital thinking, especially geared towards young people and vulnerable populations, so as to protect the quality of the public debate. In a changing and challenging context with mutual learning, it is crucial to have this to guarantee a more informed democracy which is participatory and resilient throughout the entire hemisphere. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We truly appreciate the delegation of Guatemala and the group of volunteers for celebrating this special session, and we thank the panelists for their presentations as well. I would like to take advantage to reiterate my solidarity with the victims of the United States as they recently have celebrated 11th of September, which will allow us to renew our collective commitment to strengthen the ties of international cooperation to work together in favor of upholding and consolidating peace. Mr. Chairman, the adoption of the Democratic Charter represents a milestone and a contribution to the inter-American system, particularly because it came out from a consensus at a time that required a unified voice to defend the principles and the hemispheric values we have, reaffirming that democracy is not just a form of government, but rather a condition for peace, development, and social justice. The Charter is also an instrument that is or has crucial components for social, economic, and political development of our peoples. It underscores that democratic values are not just attributed for civil and political rights, but also look at economic, social components on the fight against poverty. It is not dogmatic, but rather we're talking about principles for tangible results and greater opportunities offered to everyone. I underscore that democracy is not just a definitive place, but a dynamic process that requires complete will to adapt to the times and the national context, which are changing all the time. Nor is it a question of applying formulas, but rather to step up to the realities of each nation, defined by their history and the needs of their peoples, which today grapple with threats and challenges that didn't exist 24 years ago when it was adopted. We truly appreciate Secretary General Rambino on the Day of Democracy, in which he underscored the importance of strengthening democracy through free elections, solid institutions, good public management, and access to rights for all. These components are a very valuable point of departure to analyze this day, inviting us to also have an introspective moment for all things that have taken place in all countries over the last 24 years. The Charter establishes that periodic, free, fair elections based on universal suffrage is a sign of sovereignty of people and is a particular point of representative democracy. And good public management are fundamental components, and that democracy is indispensable for the effective exercise of fundamental rights and human rights. Looking at these premises and hypotheses more than history, we have been able to strengthen democracy thanks to the decisive support of Salvadoran people at the polls. Popular support for public policies and initiatives with a human rights focus for security, health, education, culture, tourism, and investment. Activities that have led toward peace, hope, and opportunities for development for a nation that for decades was marked by violence. Mr. Chairman, in more than 2 decades, the mechanism of the Charter have been activated in different times during crises, showing its practical use. Although they think times have been different, it invites us to be self-critical And we have to keep open the channels of dialogue and cooperation with all states, and this is key to have positive results. It also is necessary to look at the mechanisms and with full-fledged respect for national sovereignty, remembering that the Charter in and of itself is not a binding document. It's a right of people to have democracy, to respect human rights, to have free and periodic elections and the separation of different powers, transparency in public management. These are principles that are vibrant, that we have to uphold. We have the challenge of recovering trust of our inhabitants in democracy, and this will only happen when it's synonymous with governments that resolve their own main problems and promote well-being. In this new stage, with renewed leadership, we are promoting an exchange of experiences. We want to promote democratic values for all of our inhabitants, to promote multisectoral alliances and have cross-cutting projects for the OAS so that we can take advantage of everybody's experiences and multidisciplinary experience in favor of democracy. Salvador reaffirms its commitment to the principles and objectives of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, truly believing that its application in a constructive way can contribute to strengthening democracies in the region. Thank you very much.
Costa Rica, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Assistant Secretary General, permanent representatives, observers, and illustrious delegations. For Costa Rica, it's an honor to be in this special session to commemorate the 24th anniversary of the adoption of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. This is an instrument that reflects our common history and our commitment, our shared commitment to defend democracy in the hemisphere. The Charter, adopted in Lima in 2001, not only reaffirmed that democracy and representative democracy is a sine qua non for peace, for stability and development, but it also links its vitality with human rights and the celebration of free and fair elections and transparency of public administration. 24 years after, its principles continue to be as relevant as well as indispensable. Costa Rica always defends democracy as a value that we consider undeniable. The Charter is not only a text with norms, it is a commitment, a political and ethic commitment. And we are reminded that democracy is also nourished by economic and social development, equity, and the fight against poverty. And that's where we find a comprehensive vision that continues to mark the agenda of our organization. Today, in commemorating this anniversary, we have to recognize both the progress made as well as the challenges. The region is grappling with institutional tensions, risks of democratic backstepping, and new threats that include disinformation, erosion of public trust, and the persistence of inequality. Given that the Charter continues to be a clear-cut guide to strengthen our institutions, to promote civic education, to support electoral observation, and to use preventive diplomacy, as was already mentioned by Ambassador Kralovic in his comments. Costa Rica reiterates its support to the group of volunteers and the follow-up of the Charter that has spurred on an exchange of good practices and dialogue across the board of member states. This initiative is proof that solid cooperation can be translated into concrete results to consolidate the democratic principles that bring us together. Mr. Chairman, democracy in the Americas is a collective project that requires our permanent oversight, our vigilance. To commemorate the Inter-American Democratic Charter is not just a symbolic act, it shouldn't be that, but rather an opportunity to renew commitments, to enforce partnerships, and give us a clear sight ahead. And that is democracy is the only legitimate path ahead to consolidate peace, prosperity, and dignity for all. Costa Rica reiterates that it will continue to defend this instrument with deep-seated conviction, knowing and believing that democracy it cannot be inherited or imposed. It is built. It has to be exercised, and it has to be protected each and every day. Thank you very much.
Mexico, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The delegation of Mexico truly thanks the panelists for their interventions, and we are very happy to share in the commemoration of the 24th anniversary of the adoption of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, a very valuable instrument which reflects the commitment shared by member states to promote and strengthen democracy in the hemisphere, in keeping with the Charter of the OAS and international law. Over the course of the last 24 years, the Democratic Charter has shown its relevance as a common guide to articulate the relationships of human rights, democracy, and integral development. Its value is that it was conceived as an instrument of cooperation and solidarity, which recognizes diversity of our different political and social realities, and which allows states, if they request, in a sovereign way, to strengthen their own democratic institutions and their own electoral processes. Mexico is fully committed to the principles established in the Democratic Charter, and we recognize that human rights and the rule of law and democracy are all interrelated and mutually reinforce each other. We believe that healthy democracy is a democracy that is consolidated from inside, based on its own societies and own realities, and that democracy, representative democracy, is indispensable for stability, peace, and development in the region. We also know that whilst we share common characteristics or features, there is no sole model of democracy, nor does any country or region own it. Everything has to be in keeping with the principles of international law, sovereign law, the right to self-determination, and non-intervention in the internal affairs of states. In this context, with the renewed leadership in the OAS, we open up opportunities to revitalize this original spirit of the Charter, and that this will allow us to support states having the privilege of diplomatic solutions and strengthening multilateralism as a space where we meet and understand each other. This is so that when we use this instrument for political purposes or in a selective way, the trust in the inter-American system will be weakened, inasmuch as the very Inter-American Democratic Charter itself recognizes that one of the purposes of the OAS is to promote and consolidate democracy. It is representative democracy within and abiding by the principle of non-intervention. Mexico recommits itself to democracy and the principles enshrined in the Inter-American Democratic Charter, inasmuch as these are values that we live every day as we strengthen Mexican democracy. In this vein, then, we also reiterate the willingness to continue to work in all of the spaces for multilateral dialogue that strengthens our common way of government in full-fledged abidance of the principles of international law and the foundational charter of the OAS. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I would beg the patience of the delegation of Chile. Apparently, there was a technical glitch, and Bahamas lost its spot after Mexico in the initial speakers list. So with your patience, I would ask that we now pass to the Commonwealth of Bahamas to take the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your graciousness, Chile. Good afternoon, all. The Commonwealth of the Bahamas is ever grateful for the opportunity to address this Assembly and to join fellow member states in reaffirming the enduring importance of the Inter-American Democratic Charter as we mark its 24th years of existence and service. This instrument remains a bedrock of the hemisphere's shared commitment to democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Chair, the Bahamas is not a novice to democracy. Our tradition of representative governance stretches back almost 300 years with establishment of our first elected legislature. one of the oldest continuous parliamentary bodies in the Western Hemisphere. Incidentally, there are only 2 other countries in this very council that can boast of such an accomplishment, and I sit next to one. This long history confirms that the democracy is not simply a recent aspiration for us. It is part of our national identity. Our democratic heritage is therefore both deep and distinctive within this hemisphere. As the Nobel laureate Derek Walcott of St. Lucia reminded us, and I quote, "Break a vase, and the love that reassembles the fragments is stronger than the love which took its symmetry for granted." And I close quotes. In democratic life, too, our commitment is tested and reaffirmed not by perfection, but by our willingness to repair, improve, and renew our institutions so that they remain strong and responsive to our peoples. For the Bahamas, democracy is not a matter of convenience or mere political arrangement. It represents our way of life. It guarantees the rights of our citizens, effective participation in governance, respect for the rule of law, and institutions that safeguard peace and stability. The Charter rightly insists that the representative democracy is inseparable from development and from prosperity, social equity, and meaningful opportunity are strengthened only when democratic governance is respected and protected. As a stable democratic state, the Bahamas has benefited from the traditions of civic engagement, free and fair elections, independent judicial processes, and the peaceful transition of power. Our democratic institutions have permitted the expression of dissenting voices, fostered through a vibrant civil society, upheld by laws and bolstered by oversight mechanisms. These are not abstract ideals, but a practical foundation that helps us address critical issues, such as poverty, public safety, human rights, and transparency. Yet the very necessity of reaffirming our commitment through forums such as this, and through mechanisms like the Voluntary Group for Follow-up on the Inter-American Democratic Charter, underscores that democracy in our hemisphere faces real challenges: disinformation, socioeconomic inequities, weakening trust in public institutions, and the gaps in representation are among them. The Bahamas therefore supports the work of the Voluntary Follow-Up Group to promote initiatives that strengthen democratic culture, accountability, transparency, and citizen participation. The Charter provides not only grounding principles, but also concrete tools. Its articles set out essential elements of representative democracy: free and fair elections, independence of government branches, transparency, respect for human rights, citizen participation, and institutional reinforcement. These are highly relevant to the Bahamas as we continue to refine our governance, strengthen our accountability, and ensure public trust. Further, the Charter's provisions for follow-up, assistance, and collective reflection are invaluable. Mechanisms allowing for peer review, technical cooperation, and early identification of risks to democratic order provide member states with ways to prevent erosion of democratic norms rather than reacting after the fact. The Bahamas believes that proactive reinforcement of democratic and human rights standards is more effective than remedial action alone. Chair, the Bahamas remains fully committed to the Charter's principles, to the OAS Charter, and to working with all member states to consolidate democracy across the hemisphere. We pledge to continue strengthening the democratic space for dissenting voices, deepening civic education, ensuring that reforms enhance transparency and justice and inequality, and safeguarding those institutions that protect citizens' rights. Chair, I thank you, and I thank this Council for its kind attention.
Thank you, Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And now, with my gratitude, I pass the floor to Chile.
Gracias, señor
Thank you, sir. I have a question, a thought, and a call to action. The question is whether if we could have today, as Mr. De Sela somehow said, could we have a negotiated text like this? Let's consider Article 9 and see how long we'd be negotiating that article today, despite the fact that it was agreed 24 years ago. What Mr. De Sela was saying then was that we should wonder if that type of context could be agreed on today, and that's something we should consider, those of us that are here today. And we want to thank the speakers who've spoken before that, and in particular Guatemala, which is not only translated into this, but in their opinion, in their request for the advisory opinion of the IACHR, where they ask, in fact, what are the normative scopes of democracy in light of the American Convention. 24 years have gone by since this document was approved, and in the current preamble, in the document prepared for us by the Assistant Secretariat, and we have access through our screens, the former Secretary General of the organization, Jose Miguel Insulza, said in the preamble, democracy not only means to be democratically elected, it also means to govern democratically. What does it mean to govern democratically? To respect the separation of power, non-intervention in the other powers based on the rule of law, to govern with transparency, to allow for dissent and freedom of expression, to not persecute the adversary, to promote participation of those, even of those who think different from me, otherwise it would make no sense, to defend the cultural differences and respect, and this was said in 2005, 2006, gender equality. Today's challenges to democracy are different. They have changed. The democratic rupture is no longer with tanks or soldiers in the streets, or like in the Chilean case, a hawker hunter flying over the government palace about 52 years ago. Also on September 11th, the institutional ruptures are different today. Democracies in some places have become totalitarian, autocratic, in an environment of growing polarization where misinformation is there. The public opinion plays a key role, and the constitutionally enshrined bodies are sometimes serving the reduction of democracy. So in Chile, we believe that we have to work together in a transparent manner, as our national governments, Eduardo Biogrossi did with his work in preparing this Inter-American Democratic Charter when he worked as part of the Inter-American Juridical Committee. And I don't want to just talk about this frustration and discontent. I want to call to action to all of us to always be on the side of action. As you all well know, during the presidency of our country, during the follow-up of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs proposed the establishment of a voluntary updating procedure of practices and challenges linked to the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which today is in the CAJP, so that these can be revisited again. And Chile, in this respect, will continue to promote the process so that it advances and we can come to a consensus that can make this initiative a reality. And in this calling to action as well, we express our support to Guatemala's proposal of chairing the voluntary group, and we value the work done by this group, and we believe it should come back. From now, we would like to tell Guatemala and all of you that we're more than willing to support that possible presidency in whatever work is necessary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chile. Right now I'd like to ask Bolivia to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we want to thank all the different speakers for their presentations. Sir, democracy throughout history has been qualified from different viewpoints, since Aristotle, who said it was a unique system, and to Abraham Lincoln in his famous Gettysburg Address, who said that it was the government of the people, for the people, and by the people. But maybe the best definition is the one that considers democracy a system of government that institutionalizes the exercise of public powers by the people through communication and permanent dialogue between government and governees, with a distribution and redistribution of the economy. And from this viewpoint, the democracy is not limited to the electoral processes alone, nor to the prevalence of the majorities over the minorities. It's a live system which requires the active participation of all. And permanent social justice. Its strength depends on the commitment of all actors of society and the institution's ability to guarantee equity and welfare. Today, we commemorate the 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, a document which not only establishes the formal government principles, it represents a regional commitment to democracy as a continuous and collective process, reminding us that democracy cannot just be a formal procedure. It must be a comprehensive system requiring active participation, protection of fundamental rights, inclusion of different sectors of society, and equity in the distribution of opportunities and resources. The Charter emphasizes the importance of strengthening democratic institutions, inviting us to understand that democracy is built through constant interaction between those who are governed and those who govern, with a constant and permanent dialogue so that the exercise of public power is done in a fair and equitable manner. The Democratic Charter also invites us to see it as a dynamic process that must respond to the social and economic challenges of each country, underlining that democracy is maintained when it's linked to comprehensive development, social justice, and the protection of the rights of all citizens, reinforcing the legitimacy of all institutions and the trust in the system. From Bolivia's point of view, the Inter-American Democratic Charter plays a key role since our history recently reminds us of the weakness of democracy and the need to protect it continuously beyond the classical attacks that the Chilean representative referred to. For Bolivia, the Charter is not just a framework of principles, it's a mirror reflecting our own challenges and aspirations. In recent decades, we've embraced democracy not only as a government system, but as the basis to build a plurinational state, meaning that democracy is not limited to periodic elections. It is enriched, or must be enriched, with the participation of indigenous groups, rural communities, and all social sectors of our country at all times. However, this search for a more inclusive democracy has found serious obstacles with polarization, misinformation, and the attempts to destabilization which tend to undermine the achievements reached to date. The Charter then becomes a compass which reminds us that democracy is a collective good we should all defend for us. And it links democracy with the comprehensive development and fight against poverty, which is fundamental for Bolivia. There can be no full democracy without social justice and without a decrease of inequalities. Our country, where poverty and exclusion has been historically a reality, through participative and inclusive democracy with strengthened comprehensive and sustainable development through public policies that have improved the quality of life of all citizens. The fight against poverty, promotion of education, access to health, and protection of the rights to improve vulnerable situations are essential pillars to consolidate the democratic system that must be legitimate and sustainable in time. And the Charter invites us to go beyond the electoral formalities and to deal with the roots of the problems that erode our trust in the institutions. And in celebrating this anniversary, we reaffirm our commitment to the principles of the Democratic Charter and join all efforts of the region to deal with all the emerging challenges, such as the threats of freedom of expression and the internal influence in the internal affairs of all nations. The Charter reminds us that democracy is a continuous process that requires the active participation of civil society, the respect for the diversity and ideas, and constant dialogue. This anniversary should serve for us to ponder on what we've achieved and renew our conviction that democracy, with all its challenges, is the only road to ensure our future of peace, justice, and prosperity for all peoples in the Americas. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative of the Plurinational State of Bolivia. Dominican Republic, you are next.
Mr. Chairman, on behalf of the Dominican Republic, I would like to thank the delegation of Guatemala and all the requesting delegations, as well as the chair of this permanent council, for convening this special session dedicated to commemorate the 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, an essential instrument for the defense and promotion of democracy in our region. Our gratitude as well for all the presentations by the different panelists, all quite valuable. The adoption of the Charter on September 11, 2001 was a milestone in the political history of the Americas, not only defining the representative and participative nature of democracy as a basis for the political order, it reaffirms as well the firm commitment of all member states of the organization for the protection of human rights, the respect for the rule of law, and the consolidation of democratic institutions. Today, 24 years later, we celebrate its relevance because democracy is not just a static conquest nor an ensured destination. It is a dynamic, live process which is renewed every year, and it requires education, participation, and shared responsibility. And in that respect, the Dominican Republic would like to place special emphasis on the essential role played by the newer generations in the democratic values. Sustainability of our democracies doesn't only depend on the institutional strengthening, it is also dependent on the civic conscience, the dialogue, tolerance, and the respect for diversity. It is in the schools, in the classrooms, in the community centers, in the technical and university training centers where we must place the seeds of citizens' commitment, critical thought, and respect for the democratic principles. That's where we train the leaders of our future, the men and women who wish to serve their countries, who wish to follow the ethical principles and capable of building consensus in times of polarization. In our country, we are firmly committed to this objective. We have promoted civic education programs at all levels of the educational system, promoting youth participation in consultative processes and promoting the democratic culture as a cross-cutting axis in our public policies. But we also recognize that this is a hemispheric effort, and that's why we welcome the initiatives of the OAS in promoting education in democratic values, as well as the spaces for intergenerational spaces promoted by the organization. The Inter-American Charter has been tested often throughout these 24 years and has shown it is a valuable instrument for the collective defense of the democratic institutions in our region. In the context of the interruption of the constitutional order, the threat of the respect of human rights, or setbacks in the separation of powers, the Charter has served as a legitimate framework of multilateral action, allowing member states to act based on shared principles and not on individual interests. Its existence has contributed to avoid isolations, promote peaceful solutions, and preserve the institutional stability in critical moments. Mr. Chairman, today more than ever, the content of the Charter continues to be relevant in light of the new challenges faced by our democracies, including misinformation, citizens' problems, and the fights against the freedom of expression and the electoral system. It is important for us to double our efforts so that the Inter-American Democratic Charter be not just a reference text, but a live, up-to-date tool accessible and understood by all our people. And for this, we must make education to consider the promotion of the democratic culture, and that should be a regional priority. Democracy is a common good which must be taken care of, taught, and strengthened every day. Thank you very much.
Dominican Republic. I now invite Canada to take the floor.
Monsieur Président, Canada remercie les panélistes.
Mr. Chairman, Canada would like to thank the speakers for their so relevant presentations of the Charter adopted in Lima under tragic circumstances at the time, but showing the tremendous collective courage. The Charter shows our commitment for democracy. More than 2 decades later, the Charter continues to be essential. But today, we are facing a new generation of threats with more insidious and complex issues, particularly a persistent destruction of the trust of citizens in their democratic institutions. And distrust fed by misinformation, fake information, and foreign influences on all state and non-state actors who use the digital space to manipulate institutions, polarize societies, and weaken the electoral processes. And the increase in criminality places public safety in a difficult situation, undermining the rule of law and increases the authoritarianism and the illicit criminality, weakens the democratic governance and the legality or equality of electoral processes.
American states and the Inter-American Democratic Charter remain essential. While neither is perfect, both can be instrumental in defending democracy, even in very difficult contexts. But it is not enough to react to crises once they erupt. We must also strengthen our mechanisms to prevent crises, share best practices, and support a resilient civil society. In this spirit, Canada continues to support the work of the OAS, such as our work in the voluntary group for follow-up on the Inter-American Democratic Charter. Canada is proud to support OAS electoral observation missions and to contribute to strengthening the electoral capacities of member states, including in the areas of combating disinformation and promoting gender equality. We are also continuing our efforts with regional and international partners to counter foreign interference and the manipulation of information, in particular by exposing and taking action against those who exploit these tools for hostile purposes. The Inter-American Democratic Charter is more than a text. It is a compass, a reminder that the peoples of the Americas have a right to democracy and that our governments have an obligation to promote and defend it. On this 24th anniversary, let us renew our commitment to work together with courage and consistency to strengthen citizens' trust, protect democratic institutions, and ensure that our hemisphere remains a space where democracy is not only preserved, but strengthened. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Canada. Guyana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The Guyana delegation thanks the permanent missions that requested this special meeting and also takes the opportunity to express its gratitude to the speakers for their insightful presentations today. Chair, during a period of global uncertainty, the leaders of the Americas came together in a show of unity and commitment to democratic governance, human rights, and the rule of law in the Americas, and adopted the Inter-American Democratic Charter, affirming boldly that the peoples of the Americas have a right to democracy and their governments have an obligation to promote and defend it. Since adoption on September 11, 2001 in Lima, Peru, by the member states of the Organization of American States, the Charter has become a fundamental instrument for our region. It helps us to define and puts into perspective what representative democracy entails. Essential elements such as free, fair, and periodic elections, separation of powers, respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms, transparency, accountability, the rule of law, pluralism, non-discrimination, and political participation. It has reinforced the link between democracy and integral development, including social and economic rights, encouraging governments to recognize that poverty, inequality, and marginalization are not just economic issues, but are inconsistent with democracy and democratic stability. These issues must be addressed if we are to ensure the well-being of our countries across the hemisphere. Further, the Charter has allowed for the strengthening of electoral processes, thereby increasing legitimacy and trust, and has also encouraged legal, regulatory, and constitutional reforms in several member states, bringing electoral laws, judicial independence, and human rights protections more in line with democratic norms. Chair, since independence, Guyana has navigated the challenges of building a representative democracy in a multi-ethnic and diverse country. Our aspiration of one Guyana and our socio-economic development are aligned with the principles outlined in the Charter. Chair, I spoke earlier today on the conduct of Guyana's recent general and regional elections. The presence of the OAS Electoral Observer Mission helped in ensuring transparency, accountability, and trust in Guyana's electoral process. I take this opportunity to thank again the Secretary General and the Chief of Mission, the Honorable Bruce Golding, and his team, and those countries which rendered financial support for the OAS EOM to perform this critical function. Chair, as we look towards the future, we must work together using the mechanisms provided by the OAS and other hemispheric bodies to address the evolving threats to democracy posed by disinformation, corruption, growing inequality, climate pressures, and insufficient rates of growth and development. Guyana reaffirms its commitment to upholding the values of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, and we remain ready to work along with fellow member states to ensure that democracy, not merely as a principle, but as a lived reality, flourishes in every corner of our hemisphere. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Guyana. Now I'd like to invite Panama to take the floor.
Thank you, sir. Panama joins this commemoration of the 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. It is an honor for us to have joined this request for the special session because we believe in the need to reaffirm the commitment of all states with democracy and the values of this instrument at all times. We recognize also the very valuable contribution of the speakers invited, whose thoughts contribute to enrich the debate and project the Charter as a valid and useful guide for our societies. September 11th of 2001 in Lima, member states of the OAS adopted the Inter-American Democratic Charter, affirming the rights of people to live in democracy and the obligation of states to protect it and promote it. 24 years after its approval, the Charter continues to be valid. Democracy is a fundamental pillar for peace, stability, development, and protection of human rights. And it's linked to the separation of powers, transparency in public management, and the respect for the rule of law. Panama today reiterates its support to the full implementation of the Charter and recognizes it not only a political framework, but an ethical commitment which must be translated into concrete actions to strengthen our institutions and bring democracy closer to our everyday life. Our country is active part of the voluntary group of follow-up of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which was established with Resolution AG Res 3004. And here, we've shared our willingness to promote the dialogue, horizontal cooperation, and an exchange of good practices to strengthen democratic institutions in the region. Internally, Panama has developed models and initiatives reflecting these values. The Electoral Court is a system recognized internationally for its independence and technical capacity, guaranteeing free, fair, and transparent elections. The promotion of citizen participation and in particular the inclusion of youth in the civic education programs and democratic training are essential elements of our vision of the future. These are efforts that show that democracy is not just a state that we reach forever. It is a process that is in constant evolution, requiring the commitment of all sectors of society. We also recognize that we face challenges, social inequalities, polarization, misinformation, and threats to the democratic institutions. We have to overcome them, but we need a political will, regional cooperation, and active and solidary multilateralism. The Inter-American Democratic Charter continues to be our compass. Its validity is confirmed every time our peoples claim for more justice, more participation, or more respect for their rights. In commemorating this 24th anniversary, the best honor we can give it is to ensure that its principles are translated into palpable realities for the peoples of the Americas. And to end, Mr. Chairman, Panama reaffirms its commitment to work constructively and determinedly for the Inter-American Democratic Charter to continue to be a live instrument capable of guiding our societies to more democracy, more freedom, and more inclusive development. Thank you very much.
Panama, Argentina, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is a pleasure for me to participate here in representation of Argentina and this special session of the Permanent Council to celebrate the 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. I want to thank the Guatemalan Mission for promoting this, and I also want to thank the panelists for their presentations today. And my delegation has made note of what they've said. In commemorating the adoption of the Inter-American Democratic Charter in Lima on September 11, 2001, we once again reaffirmed our conviction in the instrument, which is found in Article 1, which says the peoples of the Americas have a right to democracy, and the governments have the obligation to promote it and defend it. For Argentina, democracy is not just a government system. It is a decision of collective life. From the institutional return of 1983, our country has 40 uninterrupted years of democracy with free and periodic elections, political pluralism, and a citizenry committed to the defense of the rule of law. That continuity, which we celebrate as a civic shared patrimony, is a shared responsibility to improve and self-perfect our institutions. The Argentinian government sustains and promotes the elements that are linked to the democratic qualities, such as equality before the law, the divisions of power, the constitutional supremacy, the respect for the life, freedom, and private property, and the normative predictability, which reflects the citizens of Argentina's conviction that strengthen the trust of our citizens and promote civic culture, which all democracies need to consolidate. The experience in Argentina recently shows that the institutional and democratic qualities feed each other, strengthening the citizens' trust in their elected governments. Argentina reaffirms its commitment to the principles of the Democratic Charter and the Inter-American System of Human Rights as pillars of the regional institutions, and focus like equal under the law, protection of fundamental rights, and legal security are part of our vision of democracy. Mr. Chairman, the Democratic Charter is not just a coincidental text. It's a live pact. In its first article, it enshrines the right to democracy, and in the later articles, speaks of promotion, prevention, and respond to possible risks of the democratic systems, including collective appreciation and democratic participation. These tools reflect the maturity of our hemispheric system and combines the respect for sovereignty and the shared responsibility of protecting all institutions. Together with the Charter, the OAS has developed capacities recognized and valued by the region, like the electoral observation, technical assistance for institutional modernization, and political dialogue spaces, which are constantly felt in this organization. Argentina supports that, promoting and protecting democracy as per the mandate of the Charter and the accumulated practice. Mr. Chairman, in celebrating the 24 years of the Democratic Charter, we honor a simple and powerful idea. Democracy is the form of government that best protects human dignity and allows our citizens and the societies to face the challenges of our hemisphere. Argentina will continue to assume these responsibilities of defending democracy in the region with a Republican conviction and willingness to participate based on its experience of 4 decades of uninterrupted democratic life, with the certainty that democracy, prosperity, and peace strengthen each other. And I'll end by renewing our commitment to the OAS in its mission of promoting and protecting democracy. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. My delegation is happy to be one of the countries that co-sponsored the request for this session and would like to express its gratitude to the distinguished speakers for their valuable contributions. For Paraguay, the Inter-American Democratic Charter continues to be a fundamental instrument, a moral and political guide that guides us in the defense and promotion of democracy, representative democracy, as the most effective government system to achieve peaceful living together, institutional stability, and the prosperity of our peoples. After 24 years since its adoption, the principles enshrined in the Charter continue to be fully valid, particularly the rights of the people of the hemisphere to live in democracy under a system of respect for human rights, the separation of powers, and the celebration of free, fair, and transparent elections. We want to highlight in particular the preventive measures, which urges us to give privilege to democracy, cooperation, and dialogue under threats of fracture of the democratic system, and we highlight the interdependence established by the Charter between democracy, social development, and citizen participation, an interdependence which is mutually reinforced and has legitimacy given to the democratic system. For Paraguay, the commitment to the Charter must be translated into concrete actions, and within that framework, we reaffirm our willingness to fight against corruption, misinformation, and organized transnational crime, real threats that undermine the public trust in the democratic institutions, and we'll only be able to deal effectively if we do it in a manner of solidarity and cooperation amongst our nations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paraguay. Haiti, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Assistant Secretary General, illustrious colleagues, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, representatives, permanent representatives. Today we are commemorating the 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, adopted unanimously on the 11th of September 2001. The Democratic Charter is undoubtedly one of the diplomatic instruments which is one of the most important that we have in our region. The Republic of Haiti is very happy to have been one of the founding members and participated in the negotiation and the drafting of the Charter in 2001, as we are one of the first countries in the region to found the OAS as well in 1948. The Republic of Haiti reaffirms unambiguously the Inter-American Democratic Charter, that it has all the democratic values that undergird the Charter. We would like to highlight in this regard that the Charter is applied in all its dimensions across the board and speaks to social and economic development, which are all interdependent and mutually reinforce themselves. As enshrined in the Democratic Charter, we see that it is quite clear that poverty, illiteracy, low level of human development are factors that have a pernicious effect on the consolidation of democracy. Mr. Chairman, my country, the Republic of Haiti, is a concrete example. There's no need to look at the veracity of this wisdom when looking at the Charter in the light of the Haitian reality, which is one of the worst realities of economic development. We have to point out that the low level of economic development of the country is one of the factors that undermines Haitian democracy. And as such, it is so much so that if Haiti faces this fact, looking towards this durable, long-lasting democracy, it's not only, but it's also because of the violence that is exacerbated by poverty and misery. And it's a violence that is very pernicious as to the consolidation of democracy in Haiti. In this regard, I would like to go back to the proposal of His Excellency Fritz Alphonse Jean, transitional president and economist and former president of the Haitian Central Bank, who is against any economy of violence. And I would look at that proposal saying that in Haiti, we have an economy which is very unfair with political or does not have political stability. This vicious circle of political chronic instability and economic weakness, as Mr. Louis Saint-Jean has said, we have to promote in Haiti a democratic social system that encourages implementation of an economic, more inclusive ecosystem. And as such, Haitian democracy would be in keeping with the founding principles in the Democratic Charter. We would like to thank all the members of the Inter-American System and all of the friends who support us to reestablish public security as a sine qua non condition for elections and reestablishing democratic institutions. We should never forget that a durable democracy is a democracy based on a fair and just society. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Merci, Haïti.
Thank you very much, Shady Suriname.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The delegation of Suriname is honored to participate in this commemoration of the 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. We extend our appreciation to the distinguished panel of experts for their reflections on the enduring relevance of this instrument. For Suriname, the Inter-American Democratic Charter represents more than a declaration of principles. It is a living commitment by the peoples of the Americas to democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and the development as the pillars of peace and stability in our hemisphere. Over the past 2 decades, the Charter has guided collective responses to democratic challenges, helped safeguard constitutional order, and provided a framework for cooperation to strengthen institutions. While much progress has been achieved, the Charter also reminds us that democracy must be continuously nurtured. The hemisphere faces emerging challenges that erode democratic legitimacy. Suriname underscores the importance of addressing these issues through constructive dialogue and adherence to the principles enshrined in the Charter. Mr. Chair, democracy in Suriname is continuously strengthened through our constitutional framework, vibrant multi-party system, and active civic participation. The most recent general elections, held in May, under the scrutiny of international and regional observers, once again demonstrated Suriname's commitment to free, fair, and transparent electoral processes. Suriname is also advancing initiatives to increase public trust in governance. Parliamentary oversight remains robust. Anti-corruption mechanisms are being reinforced, and judicial independence is safeguarded as a cornerstone of our constitutional order. We are equally focused on inclusive participation and civil society dialogue to expand democratic space and ensure that decision-making reflects the voices of all citizens. Suriname also recognizes the value of cooperation with the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and other OAS organs in advancing democratic governance and protecting the rights of all peoples of the Americas. Mr. Chair, on this anniversary, Suriname reiterates its firm commitment to the Inter-American Democratic Charter as a shared foundation of our collective pursuit to democracy, development, and human dignity. I thank you.
Thank you, Suriname. Uruguay, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Uruguay would like to thank the delegations of Guatemala and Canada for allowing us to come together and celebrate the 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. Uruguay is fully committed to respecting the democratic values that are imperative for social life and peace and sustainable development of all nations. The Inter-American Democratic Charter reaffirms that the promotion and protection of human rights is a sine qua non for the existence of a democratic society and recognizes the importance that continuous development has for the Inter-American system of human rights and for its consolidation. We also recognize that economic development, democracy, and social development are interdependent and they mutually reinforce each other. For our country, as part of democracy, democracy should be ongoing work. And despite the progress made in strengthening the democratic institutions, there are various challenges in the region that have to do with the principles and values that the very Inter-American Democratic Charter, the Inter-American Human Rights Charter defends. We have completed 40 years of uninterrupted democracy since our return to democracy this year after a long 12-year dictatorship. And we are amongst the full democracies of the world, but we know that care should be ongoing. Democracy in our region is going through a context full of challenges marked by inability of the people to have their demands met, economic context of low growth or stagnation, and growing social inequalities, and people that question basic elements of representative democracy that previously we thought were unquestionable and held and involved a loyal vision with the democratic way of governing. And even in countries with consolidated democracy, we run the risk of transferring democracy into simplified ideas, a system in which public institutions are legitimized through vote, with an overview of a constitutional dimension and fundamental rights that are enshrined in the Declaration. Our hemisphere has also unfortunately seen in the last few months examples of political violence, and these have been exacerbated by extreme discourse. The use of force has led to the loss of life of people of different political and ideological stripes. These acts not only undermine our democracy, but rather they are anti-democratic in various sectors of society. In this context, we underscore more than ever the need to double up efforts to strengthen democracy and consolidate the rule of law through solidarity and cooperation in the hemisphere, according to the principles adopted in the Charter, in the Organization of American States, and in the Democratic Charter. And of course, Uruguay is ready to continue to work with the rest of our member states on the Charter and in the CAJP for new instruments to have innovative progress and to preserve regional force of the document. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Have the microphone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The delegation of Guatemala would like to warmly greet the Assistant Secretary General and the distinguished representative of member states, observers, as well as the respected panelists in this very significant occasion where we are commemorating the 24th anniversary of the adoption of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, an instrument which is crucial for political life, institutional and democratic life of the hemisphere. This delegation of Guatemala is one of the co-sponsors with other delegations, and we wanted this item included to underscore the role of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, the need to know it, to study it, and to promote its application. Each year, we commemorate the adoption of this instrument with a view to maintaining the spirit alive of democracy in the Americas. Adopted in Lima, Peru on the 11th of September 2001, the Charter recognizes very clearly that representative democracy is an indispensable condition for the stability, peace, development of our nations, as well as one of the main essential purposes of this organization. In the particular case of Guatemala, we have experienced firsthand the relevance of this instrument. The OAS, using political and diplomatic tools that the Charter offers, accompanied our country when we went through key moments to strengthen democracy. Guatemala recognizes and truly appreciates hemispheric solidarity and the effectiveness of this charter for the defense of democratic institutions. Mr. Chairman, the peoples of the Americas have the right to democracy, and governments have the duty to promote, preserve, and defend it. The Democratic Charter understands democracy all across the board as a system of life founded on respect for human rights, the rule of law, and the full-fledged participation of citizens. Guatemala reiterates its firm commitment to the application of these principles and is against all forms of discrimination. We truly believe that democracy, economic and social development, and justice are interdependent and they mutually reinforce each other. The Charter reminds us that democracy is not limited to free and fair elections, but also has to lead to dignity and well-being for everyone. As a result, Guatemala presented a request for an advisory opinion to the Inter-American Court of Human Rights through the Attorney General's Office on Democracy and Protection in the Inter-American Human Rights System. The aim is to consolidate Inter-American standards for the protection of democratic principles. In this anniversary, we have a clarion call to everyone to renew our commitment to the values that we share, convinced that only through democracy can we build a more fair, just, prosperous hemisphere in peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Assistant Secretary General, permanent representatives, alternates, observers, distinguished panelists and presenters. Good evening. Chair, my delegation is pleased to have joined with those requesting the convening of this important special meeting of the Council. On this 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, Grenada joins our fellow member states in reaffirming democracy as the essential framework for peace, security, and development in the Americas. When the Charter was adopted in Lima in 2001, our hemisphere faced challenges to democratic governance. Today, those challenges remain, though changed a bit, and though often in new and complex forms. The illicit trafficking of firearms destabilizing our communities, the persistence of poverty and inequality, and the mounting threat of climate change. These are not only social or economic issues, they are threats to democracy itself. The Charter makes this clear in Article 11, I quote, "Democracy and social and economic development are interdependent and mutually reinforcing," unquote. Grenada's commitment to the Charter is practical and ongoing. We have consistently welcomed OAS electoral observation missions, which have recognized the credibility of our electoral processes and the peaceful participation of our citizens. We have co-sponsored initiatives under the Charter and held leading roles within the organization, always stressing the link between democracy, human rights, and development. We also see the Charter at work in the concrete ways through which OAS operates. Grenadian students have benefited from OAS scholarships, expanding opportunities for higher education. Our women and youth, and especially our women entrepreneurs, have gained skills and support under the WE project to strengthen their businesses and economies. And just this year, the associated body, the Trust for the Americas, launched a Youth Digital Skills Initiative in Grenada, giving our young people the tools to thrive in a rapidly evolving ecosystem. These are not marginal benefits. They are tangible reinforcements of democratic resilience. They show how the Charter's vision, that is, integral development as the foundation of democracy, can be realized in the lives of our people. Chair, Grenada also recognizes the indispensable contribution of our observer states, whose support enriches the hemispheric community and helps make many of these initiatives possible. Their solidarity embodies the Charter's call for shared responsibility throughout in strengthening democracy. As we reflect on 24 years of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, Grenada urges that we continue to treat it not as a static text, not as one only to be resurrected in times of crisis, but as a living blueprint that it is. It calls on us to defend electoral integrity, to strengthen institutions, to eradicate poverty, and to protect the rights of all peoples. May we recommit ourselves on this occasion to this mission, to act when democracy is threatened, to support when it is fragile, and to invest when it can grow stronger by our interventions. In doing so, we will honor the Charter not only in word, but in deed, ensuring that democracy in the Americas remains vibrant, resilient, and indispensable for the progress of all our peoples. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Grenada. Jamaica, you have the floor. Jamaica, I believe your microphone is not correctly.
Chair, distinguished permanent representatives, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for the delegation of Jamaica to join fellow member states in commemorating the 24th anniversary of the adoption of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. Our hemisphere, one of our hemisphere's most significant collective commitment to the promotion and defense of democracy. Let me take this opportunity to thank the presenters before and all the member states for their very insightful presentation. As we reflect on this anniversary, the delegation of Jamaica wishes to underscore the importance of continued vigilance in upholding the Charter's commitments. Democracy requires more than periodic elections. It demands transparent governance, protection of human rights, access to justice, and genuine opportunities for all citizens to contribute to national development. Jamaica signed on this historic instrument on the 11th of September 2001 in Lima, Peru, together with other member states of this organization. At that moment, our nations pledged to affirm democracy as not only a form of government, but also a way of life rooted in respect for human rights, the rule of law, the separation of powers, and the active participation of our peoples in shaping their societies. Over the years, the Charter has served as both a guide and a safeguard. It has been reviewed and reaffirmed within our councils, reflecting its enduring relevance to the evolving political and socio-economic realities of our region. Its principles continue to inspire collective action, particularly when democracy is tested by threats such as instability, inequality, or the erosion of institutional trust. We also believe that the Charter's vision of democracy must be linked to sustainable development, security, and social inclusion. In this regard, Jamaica calls on member states to remain steadfast in their support for strengthening democratic institutions and processes across our hemisphere. In conclusion, my delegation reiterates its firm commitment to the principles enshrined in the Inter-American Democratic Charter, confident that through dialogue, solidarity, and collective action, we can continue to preserve and deepen democracy in the Americas. Mr. Chair, I thank you.
I thank you, Jamaica. United States, you have the microphone.
Mr. Chair, distinguished colleagues, the United States is honored to join Guatemala, Canada, Chile, and other co-sponsors in requesting this agenda item. Today, we convene to reaffirm our commitment to the principles of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, a document adopted on September 11th, 2001, the same day that the United States was attacked by terrorists seeking to destroy our way of life. That dark day reminds us that freedom is fragile and democracy must be defended against those who seek to undermine fundamental freedoms, weaken our institutions, impose authoritarian rule, and open our hemisphere to malign external actors. This charter's first article is unambiguous. The peoples of the Americas have a right to democracy, and their governments have an obligation to promote and defend it. For nearly a quarter century, the Inter-American Democratic Charter has provided the framework for OAS electoral observation missions to safeguard free and fair elections, diplomatic initiatives that confront authoritarian backsliding, and cooperative mechanisms that strengthen democratic institutions across our hemisphere. The United States stands firmly in defense of democracy, sovereignty, and respect for fundamental rights and freedoms that underpin our work in the hemisphere. We will not tolerate the growing influence of authoritarian dictatorships in the Americas. As Secretary Rubio has stated, the United States must never turn a blind eye to tyranny. The regimes in Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua have robbed their people of their basic rights, jailed and tried to silence political opponents, and conspired with foreign adversaries to undermine regional stability. Our approach is clear: maximum pressure, unwavering support for democratic forces, and no compromises with dictators. Anti-democratic regimes in our region, backed by China, Russia, and Iran, repress democracy at home and destabilize and dismantle democratic institutions throughout the hemisphere. These actions threaten our national security interests and America's economic prosperity, creating a ripple effect across our region. One way they do so is through the weaponization of illegal mass immigration. Nicaragua's permissive migration and visa policies invite migrants from around the world to springboard illegally to the United States, threatening the security of every country through which they pass. In Cuba, the dictatorship has repeatedly used immigration as an escape valve to quell the voices of those opposing the regime in order to remain in power. In Venezuela, the Maduro regime continues with its brutal political repression campaign, rampant human rights abuses, and a collapsing economy, fueling a historic crisis that threatens regional stability. With this in mind, we call on our regional partners to regain control of their borders, accept the return of their nationals, implement visa requirements, dismantle smuggling networks, and create the conditions for their citizens to build futures in their homelands. We call on all democracies in our hemisphere to publicly condemn the autocratic regimes in Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba. Offer autocrats no refuge, no political backing, no economic support. At the end of the day, ultimately, you can stand in solidarity with the people in these countries who are fighting for their freedom, or you can stand with their oppressor regimes, but you cannot support both. In Nicaragua, the Ortega Murillo dictatorship brutally represses members of faith communities, independent voices in civil society, and anyone perceived to oppose their grip on power. Nicaraguan authorities have announced decisions to strip opponents of their nationality. They have even prevented Nicaraguans from returning home after traveling abroad. Everyone has the right to return to their native land. Everyone has the right to a nationality. These rights are contained in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Nicaragua signed on to that declaration but treats its commitments with contempt, stranding these people abroad. We urge the OAS to hold Ortega and Murillo accountable for their abuses and their illegal and destructive migration policies and practices. We urge all member states and this organization to support the call of the Nicaraguan people for an end to such cruelties, for an end to dictatorship, and for a peaceful return to democracy. In Cuba, the regime's ruthless political repression inflicts needless suffering, and its willful economic mismanagement has led to conditions far worse than those of the special period of the 1990s. We demand the immediate release of all unjustly detained political prisoners, many held since the peaceful protests of July 2021, and call on the regime to heed the call of its own citizens and return its ill-gotten power to the people of Cuba. In Venezuela, Maduro and his cronies continue to torture and execute opponents, repress human rights, imprison opposition leaders, and suppress free and fair elections. We call on OAS member states to increase pressure on Maduro's corrupt network and ensure that the Venezuelan people are not abandoned to the whims of a criminal regime. Mr. Chair, a free society cannot exist without freedom of expression. As President Trump's executive order on restoring freedom of speech affirms, no government entity has the right to silence its citizens. The weaponization of disinformation policies to suppress political dissent must end. Free speech is the foundation of any democracy.
Thank you, United States. Ecuador, you now have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ecuador goes along to commemorate the 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter signed in Lima 24 years ago. This fundamental instrument for our continent, bearing in mind the very importance that we accord to this document for our nation's progress. It enshrines the right of people to democracy, especially through the broad participation for all citizens and accountability by governing leaders. And this is why it is up to member states of this organization to keep the spirit of the Charter alive, guaranteeing the right of our people to live in democracy. Today, democracy is threatened by various factors, some internal, such as corruption and distancing from, move away from ethic values that should guide us for countries, and the external ones, such as transnational organized crime that has infiltrated various sectors of society with a view to destroying these structures as opposed to defending democracy. These threats should be overlooked. And when it comes to the efforts of our countries, electoral processes should reflect the exercise of citizens to express their own will in a democratic way, free of vice. Legitimate points lead to development and the defense of rights and fundamental freedoms as expressed by all people. And we should underscore the work done by the EOMs of the Organization of American States. This has become a guarantee for successful electoral processes, and I'd like to highlight the process that took place in Ecuador this year. The popular will came out of transparent and democratic elections, and this is the clearest proof of the citizens' will in a country. In Ecuador, we commend Guatemala for the group of volunteers of the follow-up of the Inter-American Democratic Charters, and we express our support to the members of this group, as well as the commitment to continue to promote the right for all people in the Americas to live in democracy with freedom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ecuador. Brazil, I now invite you to take the microphone.
Mr. Chair, the Inter-American Democratic Charter, adopted 24 years ago, marked a milestone in the pursuit of a continent free from authoritarianism and external interference that in the past contributed to the establishment of dictatorships in various countries across the Americas and the Caribbean. With the Democratic Charter, the region made a clear decision to put an end to the contradictions that prevailed for decades, speaking in the name of democracy while supporting and sustaining authoritarian regimes that murdered, tortured, promoted forced disappearances, banned oppositions. To commemorate is to bring memory to the surface, including uncomfortable memory, the kind that challenges and questions us. This act of reflection is the best way to honor the Inter-American Democratic Charter. Keeping us vigilant in the face of this, I would like to evoke the memory of the victims of the dictatorship in Brazil, a regime that lasted for over 21 years from 1964 to 1985. This dictatorship produced thousands of political prisoners and torture victims and hundreds of deaths and disappearances. To show the unhuman nature, I want to speak of the case of the children that were subjected to various forms of psychological and physical torture. Many were kidnapped and handed over to other families. One of the most emblematic cases was that of Maria Amelia Teles, who was arrested and tortured in front of her young children. Edson Teles, then 5 years old, and his sister Janina, 4 years old. The dictatorship respected neither women, the elderly, nor the children, and torture was refined with the macabre cooperation of external instructors, some of whom came from countries that claimed to defend democracy. By bringing this example of the past, Mr. Chairman, is to show you that the past is not dead, and not even will it be dead, because we have to be careful that in no country are we immune to the forces that seek to undermine it. Since the 1988 Constitution, Brazil has had strong democratic institutions and a system that guarantees the separation and independence of powers. The judiciary and the public prosecutor's office are fully autonomous under the Constitution. This system of checks and balances serves as a safeguard against both old and new threats to democracy. Anti-democratic forces in Brazil and around the world now use technological innovations, artificial intelligence, and digital platforms to spread false information, amplify hate speech, incite violence and discrimination, and attack democratic institutions. The contradiction of the past, which the Democratic Charter sought to overcome, returns when, in the name of democracy and freedom of expression, efforts are made to erode democratic institutions. Freedom of expression, with full guarantee for criticisms and diversity of opinion, is non-negotiable, but it must not be confused with the freedom to commit crimes using digital tools, including for the purpose of organizing, planning, and executing the violent abolition of the democratic rule of law. Brazil is demonstrating that democracy, though always fragile, can withstand attacks from authoritarianism and violent extremism. What is required of the OAS at this moment is to be a space of cooperation, free from interference and attacks on our sovereignty, where we can exchange best practices and learn from each other's successes and mistakes. May the example evoked here of tortured and kidnapped children keep us alert to the real risk of moral collapse in societies, which, as philosopher Hannah Arendt warned, renders human beings disposable. And may this same example serve as an antidote to the hypocrisy that hides behind the rhetoric of democracy and freedom of expression to promote the return of authoritarianism in new forms, but with the same nefarious outcomes: injustice, violence, exclusion, inequity, the closing of civic space, the end of plural debate, and the regression of our civilization's process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brazil. Spain, I invite you to take the microphone.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Chair. In this Permanent Council, celebrating only 2 days after the International Day of Democracy, Spain would like to join this commemoration of the 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. We reaffirm our commitment to freedom, equality, and human rights, to continue to work to strengthen democratic values and build a fairer future for all. A commitment which is reflected at the OAS in the collaboration with key projects for democratic governance. Without being exhaustive, I'd like to mention the EOMs, and the work of the strengthening of democracy, the courses for electoral candidates, the support to the Inter-American Model Law of Parity of the Inter-American Commission of Women, or the full support to the Court and Commission on Human Rights, and not neglecting our commitment to Haiti. We join the member states to celebrate this democratic instrument as an instrument reaffirming the rights of the people of the Americas to live in democracy and the government's obligation to defend it and promote it. As an indispensable condition for peace related closely to the respect for human rights. We are fully aware of the fact that the world is going through a moment of profound uncertainty where the democratic values are being challenged continuously. And within the multilateral space in particular, we are then forced to think carefully. And I'm just going to bring it down with 2 ideas. First, democracy began by excluding women. And then feminism, as a democratizing force, led to the struggle that promote the universality of rights, beginning with the universal vote. And today, Spain, in its active and sound feminine foreign policy, celebrates that feminism has and will contribute to strengthen democracy. And I reiterate our commitment to equality, gender equality, as a true challenge of mankind. Our task to continue guaranteeing the right, the justice, and freedom of mankind. The second idea is that in times of crisis, of difficulties and inequalities, authoritarianism tends to find the right road to strengthen extremism and polarization. Fascism is the great challenge of democracy. There's no possible mistake. Fascism is not just another ideology of the political debate. It's the denial of democracy itself. Unfortunately, we have a sad story about this in our country, as young democracy, which in 2025 is celebrating proudly its 50th anniversary of freedom with democracy. To preserve democracy is an ethical and political task which goes beyond the elections. It means strengthening democratic institutions. It means multilateralism and citizen participation. It means fight against misinformation and reduce inequality and poverty. And to that end, the government of Spain, together with the governments of Brazil, Colombia, Chile, and Uruguay, sponsors the initiative which began in 2024 to favor democracy with a view to offer an alternative to the reactionary and movements to strengthen in peace, justice, and social cohesion. And lastly, to preserve democracy and democratic values is a task which knows no language or accent. It knows principles, values, and conviction. So I cannot forget that the Palestinian population is suffering one of the most infamous episodes of the 21st century. And Spain rebels against this and has raised its voice from the very beginning at all possible fora. Thank you.
The floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And my delegation is happy to participate in this celebration of the 24th anniversary of the Inter-American Democratic Charter and thank the speakers for the wealth and quality of their presentations. And at this time, France reaffirms its profound commitment to the principles of representative democracy enshrined in the Charter in a world context framed by the democratic erosion, and it's a principle that continues to be essential. The democratic values are a historical link between the Americas and Europe. And the shared wish to fight for this and for the sovereignty of our people. We know that democracy is not acquired, it's built, it's defended. It promotes a commitment of all citizens to favor the freedom of press, the human rights, and so many other elements that we must work for. And today we must reaffirm the democratic values, particularly in light of the increased fake information which undermines the trust in democracy. Democracies are being attacked not only by weapons but by words. And France defends its commitment with its partners to enshrine democracy and greets and welcomes the work of the OAS for democracy in the hemisphere, in particular in the electoral observation missions. Thank you very much.
Pleasure of inviting you to take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Assistant Secretary General, distinguished colleagues, Italia, as an observer country and historical partner of the OAS, recognizes the importance of the Inter-American Democratic Charter and want to join this celebration of the 24th anniversary of its creation. The Charter is not just a legal document. It is a fundamental pillar of our inter-American activity, which has been promoted for decades to promote peace, stability, and prosperity in the region, and representing the collective commitment of the American nations with democracy and human rights. In its first article, it states the right to democracy and the obligation of the governments to promote it and prevent and defend it, as has been mentioned by several delegations today. And the Charter, at the same time today, represents or could be considered to be an instrument whose importance goes beyond the Western Hemisphere and represents a reference framework for collaboration and promotion of shared values. I want to remind you also, as one of the traditional currents of Italian cooperation with the OAS, is precisely in the support of its electoral observation missions, which are a valuable mechanism not only for monitoring, but it represents a useful tool to improve processes and advance in the democratic road. Obviously, democracy is not only during elections. It must be something linked daily to the promotion of human rights and fundamental freedoms. One of the speakers spoke of democracy in exercise between one election and the other. And that is, in fact, at the hearts of democracy. We must also recall that the people are there. As it says in the Charter at the beginning, democracy is indispensable to effectively exercise fundamental rights and human rights in its universal, indivisible, and independent nature. I don't want to review the whole text, of course, but I do want to point out the importance of so many other references, such as the comprehensive development, the fight against poverty, promotion of democratic culture, full and equal participation of women in political structures of the countries, as well as articles that in the Charter speak of true collective responsibility for the defense of democratic systems. The Act is therefore a compass and a thermometer of the state of health of democracy in the region. And we must fight every day so that we don't have any democratic illiterates. Thank you very much.
With that, we seem to have reached the end of our agenda for today's meeting. I would like to extend my thanks to all who have contributed. A special thank you, of course, to our distinguished speakers. Today's presentations, as well as the comments by delegations, will be reflected in the corresponding minutes of this special meeting. The discussions and perspectives shared will undoubtedly advance our reflection and collective mission to strengthen democratic governance throughout the Americas. There being no further business to consider, this meeting is adjourned. Merci et au revoir.